I know in Canada that we've had cases. One case that I worked on quite extensively, the Toronto 18 case back in 2005, 2006, of the 18 individuals who were eventually arrested and charged with planning to commit a terrorist attack. Five were actually young offenders under the age of 18, and four of those were acquitted. They were seen as not having had a significant role in the terrorist plot. The fifth young offender was actually tried as an adult. So I guess the severity of the crime was such that the
Mm.
Crown, the prosecution in Canada, was able to actually get the court to try them as an adult. Do you have a similar provision in Australia where if something is serious enough, a young offender can be tried as an adult?
No, if they're under the age of 18 at the time they commit the offence, they're tried as a juvenile. However, for serious offences, even those juveniles will go to a higher level court, so they won't be heard by a children's court. And that higher level court can make a decision that young person, once convicted, might be subject to an adult order. So they might transfer from us to an adult correction facility at 18. From 18 they can,
Okay.
or they may make an order that that child or young person is still vulnerable and therefore needs to stay in a juvenile justice facility. But in we don't, even though they're tried at a higher level court, they're still tried as a juvenile. So things like their name is suppressed, things like that. Yeah.
Right. Right. Okay. Now, you alluded to the fact that when you started looking at, CVE, and by the way, I've talked to officials in Canberra who were running the national CVE program in Australia a
Yep.
couple of years ago, and we all struggled with, what is how do you define CVE? Then, of course, people started throwing the acronym PVE as, preventing rather than countering. Then there was PCVE, and it seems the acronyms were flying around, and everyone's got it's a dog breakfast of kind of things. So you said at the beginning, Peter, that there were six individuals that you initially had worked with in New South Wales that were young offenders, so young people, but were also involved in terrorist attacks. Without getting into the details, nitty-gritty, because they were young, can you
Mm-hmm.
describe for my listeners sort of generically what kind of involvement these young people had? I mean, were they peripheral hangers on to something, or was this a really serious case where young people were deemed capable of actually carrying out a terrorist attack in Australia?
Yeah, look, so we've had young people charged and convicted of doing acts in preparation, which is an offence under Australian law for actually preparing to do a terrorist act. So they were in the stages of undertaking a terrorist act. Yeah, all the way to young people who have been involved, I guess, more on the, you know, I find it difficult to say on the periphery. I mean, you're either involved in violent extremism or you're not. And the role that you take in that doesn't necessarily define how seriously you believe in the cause. So we've had young people involved in propaganda, for example, and recruitment or financing,
Mhm.
all the way through to
Mhm.
actually undertaking a violent act as a result of their belief. So it's interesting because I know people think about it as a spectrum of seriousness, and that's one of the things that we had to talk a lot to staff about is it may not seem like such a serious act, but we all know in the space that recruiters are some of the most valuable assets for extremist organisations.
Yes.
Not necessarily always the people who are going to engage in violence, but the people who can motivate people through to engage in violence. So, in terms of seriousness, what do we talk about in that respect? Yeah.